Over 2,800 people have made it into the 2 Comma Club by making at least $1 million in their business. And you get the opportunity to understand exactly how it is that they have done it on an individual by individual basis through this podcast. If you're interested in learning more about the tidbits and advice that they have, then you should consider subscribing to the 2 Comma Club newsletter, where you'll get daily updates and advice on the podcast and the things that we are learning from the individuals who have made at least $1 million. Just go to 2ccnewsletter.com or click the link in the description down below and subscribe. Welcome back to the 2 Comma Club podcast. Today, Chris Davison and I are joined by Bart Miller. Bart Miller is an amazing individual that we got to meet at Funnel Hacking Live last year and have since gotten involved in his community, visited him in Idaho and his I Do Epic live event. It was amazing. So, Bart, if you can kind of tell the audience who you are and what you're up to, that'd be fantastic.
Wow, if I could tell them who I am, I would know myself. So that's a big ask right there. No, thank you for the introduction. And it's been a pleasure to have both Chris and you, John, in the community and in the culture, and to just watch you guys evolve. And I love this interview series because I think it's powerful in getting to know people at a different level, not just because of the accolades, but because of who they really are. And I think sometimes we hide behind certain accolades instead of being present with who we really are and our achievements. But anyway, yeah, we've been blessed enough to get the 10X award, multiple 2 Comma Club awards, and YouTube awards and all sorts of things. And I always, I went for a long time not submitting for the awards. And the reason I didn't submit for them was because I believed that, and could be ignorance or something to your audience to think about, but I just didn't want the awards for they mean something, but they didn't mean it to me. What meant to me was, can people really know who I am and the skill sets that I have, versus I have to prove it through an award, if that makes sense. But that being said, I'm grateful for the system and what it does give you the ability to do. But I saw so many people going after the awards, and I don't mean this in any good or bad way. It is just what it is. But they didn't matter that they were $1 million in debt to get a $1 million award. They just wanted that award, which I think shows a lot about human dynamics and human culture, because even in athletics and things we do, we will destroy ourselves to get something that sometimes is, it's impressive to say we have it, don't get me wrong, but it's not who we really are inside. So anyway, I don't want to get on a rant here to start it off. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, and grateful for the opportunity to be here, and grateful that we've been blessed and abundantly blessed in the ability to get those awards. Thank you.
I appreciate you popping on board as well. One thing I wanted to say, I've really learned a ton from you, but one of the first things I met, you got into a recipe for brownies, and it just made sense because I like to boil things down. They're complex and make them simple. And I really resonated when I first met you, and it was awesome. And one of the things you helped us as we were talking to folks who are millionaires or have $1 million award or multi-million-dollar award is you really set the crust for what our business is now. I don't know if you realize that or not, but saying, hey, it's awesome that you made $1 million somewhere online or revenue, but what's your, what'd you keep? What did you keep? So that really had John and I inspired to see so many folks clawing and scratching to, bring in this revenue, but how much are they keeping? And I looked at my business, and it was a stark reality when I was spending as much as I was making. So we really turned that ship around, and we really want to help other people do that with scaling your profits. And so you've been the catalyst. So I appreciate that. But also, I think you have that way with people that you can kind of just see into them and just read people. I don't think that's natural from your background. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think that's natural. I think really you come from really humble beginnings. And I think, and for me, I've always wondered, as I've known you, I've heard a lot of stories and got a chance to get to know you, but what turned a corner from you coming from a rural community in Idaho to being someone who's a connector in business and known as a connector, a power connector, I would say? Like, for me, I just never had that piece of the puzzle, seeing how you bridge the two things, if you don't mind sharing that with our audience.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate all of that. And I just want to make sure I got your question correctly, is from humble beginnings, how they start to become a real networker at the level I'm at today. Is that what you're asking me?
Yep.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, great question. So those of you that don't know, I was raised on a little farm in Rigby, Idaho. And, it was amazing. I was raised by my grandmother and my father. and because of family situations. And what a pleasure that was. I got to really be around that old generation, I should say, and really learn that and be able to transition also into the generation that we are here today, which has been crazy to think about. And in our house, we had a coal stove, so I know what a clinker is, and a lot of people don't even know what that word or never heard of a clinker in their life. But that is when coal has been 100% burnt. You take the clinkers out of the coal stove and you take them outside. And I got the privilege of doing that when I was a kid, but we didn't have heat in our rooms. And that was the stove in Idaho that worked. That's how we did it. So long story short, super grateful for that and to be where I'm at today. But how did I get into networking? Was my father, to be honest with you, was a school teacher, and he was a networking machine. And what I mean by that, he didn't realize he was networking. He just loved the community. And it's one thing I loved about Japan. If you go back in the history of Asia and Japan and how they built Japan, was bathhouses, community bathhouses. They didn't have a shower. They didn't have a tub in their house. So they would go to a community bathhouse, and that's where they would bathe. Now, if you want to get close to somebody, maybe it's close. I don't know if that's the right term. I'm just going to say it that way. But be naked and sit there and talk to somebody, right? It's a different type of connection. And I don't mean that to be funny. I literally am serious. I'm really serious about it. And what it did for Asia and Japan, I wouldn't say Asia, but Japan, I do know, was it brought you together in a community different than what it does today, where we're in our houses, everything's in our house. We don't get out. We don't do that kind of stuff. My father was very much a man that he loved people. And I'll tell you a quick story about my father that'll probably help you understand why networking and why my belief structure is what it was. And I do credit him for this. But I'll never forget that my father is an amazing craftsman, and he's an amazing construction man. And so there was a gentleman that needed new cabinets in his house. Now, this gentleman had 6 kids, and they were very young in age, but he was he didn't have the abundance that he desired at that point in his life. And he came to my father and asked him to build a set of cabinets for him. My father agreed to do those, and the pricing that my father gave him was particle board. But he knew that particle board would not last with 6 kids, as we all know if you know any construction. And if you don't know construction, it's a cool looking wood, and it would look great all put in, but it's not durable enough that it can withstand a kid climbing on a drawer or something of that nature. So my father knew this going into it, but my father built those out of solid wood to put in that gentleman's house instead of building the particle board. And I was like, at a young age, I was like, Dad, like, that actually cost you money. Like, that's not a good business idea. My dad said, it may cost me up front, but my word and my name is worth more than what that's going to cost. Because if somebody walked in that house and saw those cabinets were destroyed, after 6 months, they would say, who built your cabinets? And they would say, Alan Miller did. And he goes, I can't have that. But I also understand where this gentleman's at. And it takes me the same time to build them out of this, as far as cuts and all that it does to do out of the other. So I'm going to do this, and hopefully that will lead to other amazing things that will happen in my life. But that's what we do as Millers, and we pack the Miller name, and therefore, that's just how we work. And I was like, wow, I need to sit with that. At a young boy, it taught me a really valuable lesson, though, in my career and the things that I was doing. So through that, my dad would always be at the grocery store and everywhere, and he talked to everybody. Still to this day, if you go to my dad to town, you don't just take 15 minutes and go to town. You're going to take an hour to an hour and a half, because he's going to run into somebody that he knows, and he's going to ask him about their dog, that he remembered that dog had this or that, And so I learned it from a very young age that just everybody's everybody. It didn't matter if it was the owner of the store, or if it was the grandmother that needed her cart pushed out to the car. We were going to talk to them, and we were going to treat them exactly the same, and get to know them. So that's how that started. That led into, obviously, greater things in my career, but being able to open your mouth and recognize things and see things was something my dad taught me. So for example, if you were walking out and you saw a lady that had a baby and she had a cart and she was overwhelmed, you didn't just say, hey, how are you today? You literally went and said, let me take the cart, and where are you at, and what can I do to help right now? And that led to, well, what do you guys do, and why are you doing this? And I was like, oh, da 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 da. And that led to, well, my husband or this, all these things. It's amazing when you start to serve how many people want to serve back. And that wasn't what we were looking for, but that's what happened. That's the outcome of the situation. So I've always looked at, it's funny, like even a podcast, people will ask and say, hey, will you be on this? And it's like, he's got back from Salt Lake yesterday. I've got to be at a wedding reception in Vegas next week. There's all these things. You can always excuse yourself out of doing things, or you can say, no, I'm going to find a minute, because guess what? Chris and John will find a minute for me too. And that's not the way you look at it, but eventually there will be something that always happens because you were willing to do the things. So that's how that happened in my career, was because of my father's example.
That's awesome. That's a great story. It sounds like you were blessed with an amazing example of what it looks like to be a man of, honestly, relationships, right? Like, in my opinion, in the world, there are three really valuable things that we hear about as business owners, internet marketers, and everything. And it's health, wealth, and relationships, right? And I think at the end of the day, health and wealth are great, but what really brings the value to life is relationships. And it sounds like the value of that was really shown in your story growing up. So
And
based on what you were just saying there,
before you go
in
on,
the
just a really
yeah,
quick one to point out, I think that the health and relationships personally should be the only two things. Wealth is only a byproduct of those two things.
mm-hmm.
And I know that people, like, I've debated this before and I'm pretty adamant about it, but I really would debate with anybody to the point, wealth only comes because you're healthy and because of your relationships, no matter how you want to. And people add that in there, and I think it's okay, but it's a byproduct in my personal opinion. It's not,
Definitely.
it's nothing else but a byproduct of those two things.
It's funny. I actually, when I think of wealth, I don't even think of it monetarily personally. Like, I have three symbols that I wear. I have the whoop, and this is my health thing, and then I have time. My watch is my wealth thing, and then relationships is my cross. So when I think of wealth, I always think of time, and it's like we have so much time available, and it's like that is the one thing that we have that is more or less a scarce resource that we have to choose to be effective with, right? And we can influence it by taking care of our health and things of that nature, which is amazing. But that also leads me into the concept of scarcity versus like abundance mindset and things of that nature. And I know that a lot of individuals in our space, we battle with transitioning in most cases from an area where our environment taught us to be more scarce mindset to more abundance mindset. Was that ever anything that you found was a hurdle that you had to overcome during your entrepreneurial journey and in life?
Yeah, if anybody says that they haven't, they're liars. And I mean that as serious as I can mean it. Because abundance is like running a marathon. There's never an end. So what I mean by that is that that's the thing that I love about our country, and I think we've forgotten about this country, is that, if I'm going to get a little more is it called philosophical? Is that the right word I'm looking for? Is
Yeah.
the fact that I watch, and I'm always in awe of watching immigrants, which all of us are. All of us were slaves at one point in our life. I don't care what race or what ethnicity you are today. And that's another thing that burrs people up. It's just at what point. But all of us come from slaves in some way. But you watch an immigrant come in this country and they become extremely wealthy because they know they've got to. They have a purpose. They have a mission. They have a why. And so that's the thing I've always had to go back to in my life and say is, what is abundance? So define abundance for me in every aspect. Well, most people will say if you've got something to eat and a place to stay, you're abundant. Now, there might be a different definition for you guys or other people, I don't know. But I think we try to, it's a term that we don't really understand is abundance. Does that make sense? And so the answer
Yeah.
is, once you get to a certain pedestal, I guess if you want to call it that, there's always another pedestal. There's more abundance, or there's this, what you want to classify abundant. Da, 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 da. So it's such a term that I just want to if there's something called cancel culture, I want to cancel that, because abundance is a mythical thing. It's like it can always be elusive to us. Like what I see as abundance, somebody else would look at as, too much, to whatever. I don't know what the right term is, but just lavish in essence. You're chasing the wrong thing. So the answer is, yeah, I fought it. There's no doubt I fight it. I mean, I'm in situations where I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done with my career? What did I do with my life? Like, are you kidding me right now? And then instantly I have a conversation with somebody else. They're like, man, you're so abundant. And if I could only be you. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this is crazy pants, right? It's this cycle we can get into that is unhealthy. It's almost immoral for us to do, but yet we have a tendency to do it. But to answer you boldly, hell yeah, John, I fought it. Of course I fought it. I'm human, like I'm around all the marketing and all the belief structures that you are, that I'm never going to be abundant enough. And I've got to work harder. And if I don't work harder, then I'm going to let somebody else down, and all the crap that goes through my head. And so the shadow side of me is very real. Let's be clear. And I'm not going to try to hide that. But how I try to comp with that shadow side is by understanding that what is abundance and what's the life I want to live? What is my lifestyle? And that lifestyle I've got to stay true to, and I've got to be hardcore attached to, and then nothing else matters. But I don't know if I'm answering you, I don't know if there is a right answer, but
Yeah.
that's it for me, is that abundance is a word that we've got to be very careful with, in the fact of it can drive us to our grave.
I like that. And I think you really helped foster that in me. I've had an abundance mentality, and I want to help people and add value. And I just see there's so much that I'm really not giving away my secrets. I'm really helping people. And I think you do a good job of that, which leads into my next question is, with kind of your niche in business, I see you as a coach. I mean, that's how I view you. That's how I met you. And if you can let folks know kind of what your niche is in business and what you're good at, and then really how you add values. I think a lot of people get into coaching or it becomes something, a term, but I think you give a lot of value, obviously from life experience, but also how you carry yourself, the goals you set for yourself. So if you can talk about your niche area of business, and then, kind of how you add value to folks that a lot of people I don't think are doing. So I like you to say in your own words, though.
Thank you, Chris. I would say I help people architect their life by design. I mean, that's the one thing I feel like and when I say that, Chris, you hit on it a little while ago, and I hid behind this a lot in my career, and only about 5 years ago did I expose it at the level that I'm willing to expose it today. And I felt like I had to expose it, because if I didn't, it would be taken away from me. And it was one of those things that I was like, whoa, I've got to be more upfront with this. But you said it, that I can look at people and see more in them than they can see in themselves. And that's been a gift since I've been a little boy. And so it's interesting that if I can spend a month in the same room with somebody and listen to them and watch them and really be true to myself, I can literally look at them and see them and go, oh my gosh, this is your why. This is what you were called to do. This is where we need to put you. And that's a gift. I don't know how I got it. I'm not going to even question how I got it. It's just the ability that I have, that I came to this earth with. And I don't even know how to monetize it sometimes. But when I say architect people's life by design, what I'm really saying is I'm able to get into their psyche and see the things they're missing and how they're making their life more encumbered than they need to, and how they need to step in their superpower. Now, it's always funny in our careers, as you guys know, to be the lifeguard in our own career, which means other people can go and say, well, Bart, why don't you do it this way? And I'm like, wow, that's insightful, but yet in our own swimming pool or our own thing, it's like we're drowning amongst these things. But that's what I am. I'm a really, really, if not one of the best in the world, lifeguards that there is. I'm able to sit on the throne, and I don't mean that in a hierarchy, but I really can sit there and say, okay, I just need to watch your swimming pool. I need to watch what's going on. I need to see you as a lifeguard. I need to see those things. And then instantly something will come and it's just like, that's it. And then I'm able to say, okay, here's your, for no better term, your why. This is what you're there for, and help you architect that by design.
That's beautiful. I like that a lot. It really, when you use the analogy of the lifeguard conversation, it's making me think a lot of the athletic side of things, where you need to be conscientious of both the workouts you're doing and the things that you say yes to, but then also simultaneously the things that you say no to and the things you don't take on, so that way you have the room to do the things you're supposed to do. So have there been any specific times that you can think of where one of the best things you did was letting go of something that allowed you the space to be able to take on the right things that you could share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if I have an answer for that, to be honest with you. I've always designed life as how do I say it? I don't let go of things. I put them on pause. So it's interesting. Like, I didn't team rope for 10 years, but now I'm back to team roping because I put it on pause because I wanted to test and try other things. And so what I've really found in my life is I love to be a Renaissance man. It's one of my things. Like, I love to try things, and I love to figure out the recipe to those things and be very successful. Now, does that mean I'm like, and people get frustrated, like, well, how do you not just get so attached? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, if my kids come to me and they want to try something, I'm not afraid to say, well, I can pause bodybuilding right now. Like, it's not who I am. It's just a byproduct of what I've done for a time period that I've tested out, and I'm okay to try something new. And so, to answer that, I don't know that I've like cut something or tried something. I don't look at them. And once again, I know you're not saying it as a failure, but I look at them as I'm just testing things. It's like I'm adding things to the ingredient called life. And life to me is a game, and there's different levels of that game, but it's a game. Therefore, if I don't try some certain paths and find failure, which I don't look at as failure, then I don't get to reboot and start again. And so it's like I've really tried to get that out of my psyche of, have I had an epic failure in my life? Of course there's failures. Like, I can talk about businesses that have been blown up and all the things. And yes, I wish I wouldn't maybe have not gone down that path, I guess, if I were to say that. But reality is, if you really dove into it, John, I would say, yeah, I would never change the experience at the same time. You see what I'm saying? I don't know
Yeah.
what the outcome would have been if I hadn't. So I don't know that I'm not trying to skirt around your question. I'm just really trying to say, I don't look at wins and failures any different. I just look at them as, this is the game of life, and here I am. Now, if you want to dive into something I made a mistake on, I probably should, well, yeah, of course, there's all those things. And that's in every aspect of my life, every aspect. But there's also wins in every aspect of my life. But I try to be that vessel that's just like, let's go, let's explore. It is a game for me. And therefore I'm going to act as if it's a game, and so game on, let's go. But when I go hard. And so when you crash, when you go hard, sometimes it really sucks. Like, you got a lot of bruises, you got a lot of, war wounds from it. But I can look at those as like, ooh, that was a failure. Or I can look at it as, damn, that was a fun freaking journey. Holy shit. Wow. Did you see that crash? Like, whoa, they're going to put that one all over YouTube. That was awesome. And then I can turn around and say, you know what, I'm going to do it again. And one day I'm going to have this, that, and the other. But the difference is I'm going to do it like a cyclist. And most people look at a cyclist and say, why do they shave their legs or their hair off their body? And they say it's aerodynamics, which is the farthest from the truth. But they don't know what they don't know, even though it can help in that way. Let's be clear, but it's not really why they do it. Why they do it is because if you've ever had chunks of hair grab asphalt, they will grab follicles of hair and rip the entire skin out because it gives it a way to grab something instead of slide across something. So when you shave your legs, it gives the road no way to grab that hair follicle. So you get road rash, but not road chunks. So that's the way life can be. There's certain little things you can do to protect yourself, to where I know I'm going to crash, but I want some road rash. I don't want chunks of skin. I don't want it to be so deep that it can never heal, and it's months and months and months. So to answer your question, I've learned how to maybe shave my arms or my legs from some of those things that I got chunks pulled out of the very first time, but I'm still going to have crashes. And I don't say I look forward to them, but I know they're going to be there. So I might as well enjoy the journey.
I love that. I ate it this week on a bike. My bike went left and I went right. So I didn't have six legs, but it was just a muddy corner. It came around. I was flying, didn't anticipate it. And my bike did. I just didn't anticipate it. So I get it. So I've had a couple of things. I tried skiing this week. I had some whiplash. I tried cliff jumping this year. So I get it. I totally get where you're coming from, trying things. That's kind of how my mindset is. But one of the things I run into, John and I have had a lot of discovery calls trying to help folks and just learning about people. I'm sure you have too, is fear. I just see fear as such a crippling, paralyzing thing in business. And these are successful people, and it's all levels of fear, what their fear is based on. And that's one of the things that John and I are like, well, how can we help folks with their fear? Just, talk about our experiences. I'm super curious about this right now personally. So I guess my thought question for you, if you don't mind me asking, is I know you're coaching, you're helping a lot of folks at high levels. How are you coaching them past themselves, really, to get to the next level of fear? Because you taught me that I am my own worst enemy. As I look at it, I really am my own worst enemy and the fears I have. So I've been really working on that myself. So if you don't mind alluding to how you help folks or coach folks or some advice to folks who are listening, how to get past that to get to the next level.
Good. So one of the best questions you can ask anybody, and I think it's I'm not going to say I have one of the best answers, but I'm going to try to give you one of the mic drop answers. So Oprah Winfrey, in all of her interviews that she ever did, so there was one thing that everybody asked. Nobody didn't ask this in every interview she ever did. And here it was. Was that good enough? Do you think that was okay? That was a question. Even Barack Obama, like anybody that she ever interviewed. Because here's the deal. We don't feel like we're enough. That's fear. Fear is because we don't feel good enough. Now, here's the mic drop to it. You ready? You guys better be pumped for this, because this is the real thing right here. Okay, ready? So this is how I do it. You're never more alive in your life than the time you're about to die. So if you want to know when you're the most alive, it's when you're scared shitless. So if I take you up on top of a bungee jump and I say, Chris, you got this tied to you and I'm pushing you off, I guarantee you your endorphins and your fear and your excitement and everything inside of you probably has never been more heightened in your life. And there you're the most alive. Fear is where we find life. You're never more alive than the time you're about to die. So think about that. If fear is something inside of you, it's teaching you how to be alive. It's teaching you to be excited because you're alive. If you weren't alive, you wouldn't have fear. Now, how you deal with fear is understanding you're not alone, that every single person on planet Earth has it. And every single person, I don't care how successful you are, still doesn't feel adequate or enough. Therefore, if you understand you're in the same football game as I'm in, you can comprehend it. You can use it to your advantage, because most of the players in the game don't even realize they're in the game. Therefore, how can they play the game? Okay. So that's an interesting thing about it. So fear is only a byproduct of being inadequate and not feeling like you're enough. So when you don't feel like you're enough, you've got to sit with yourself and say, what is causing me to feel like I'm not enough? And when you can understand that, then you can start to address fear. Fear is also the same energy as what? Happiness, excitement. Okay. But your brain doesn't know either one. any differently. So once you understand that, then you can play the game of life in a different way. Now, does that mean I don't have fears? Of course I do. But as soon as they come in, I'm like, ooh, is that a fear or is that excitement? I want to try it into excitement. Like, this is, yeah, whoo, I'm alive. Oh my God, this is great, but it's exciting. Instead of, oh God, I'm scared to death. Now, let me tell you, in fear, those who relax and understand it and let it become exciting actually excel. It's learning how to turn that into that versus the other, where you disable yourself and you become so scared that you freeze. And we all know that all of a sudden I'm coming, here's a tree coming at me and I'm skiing. Oh my gosh, fear. If I go, what happens to me? Tree. If I go, it's coming, I'm going to relax. I'm going to let this happen. Miracles can happen. Okay. It's the same in a car accident, which is very interesting in studies. Not ever recommend this, but let's say a human that's drunk or asleep in a car accident and it happens, they're so relaxed that most of the time they walk out over the person that is 100% just like, like they're everything about their body. So it's a funny thing in fear that we have to teach ourselves in the game of inadequacy, I'm not enough, all those things. First and foremost, how to process. Second thing is how to relax in it and not let overwhelm restrict us, if that makes sense. So if I were coaching either one of you through that, hopefully with these insights, next time fear comes to you, say, thank you, fear, for being here. How are you showing up in my body? Most of us know, if I say, where do you find fear in your body? You'll be like, oh, but we don't understand. This is the vessel to teach us how to deal with all those emotions, all those things. And if I go back to as a child, right, and I'm not going to get into a lot of woo-woo stuff, even though I'd love to, there's this inner child inside of us that we learn to, you can't throw a temper tantrum. You can't voice this. You can't laugh out loud. You can't be mad in this moment because that is wrong. You're an adult now. Now shape up, right? But if we were to go to that inner child and that fear, sometimes we just need to just absolutely just yell. And then all of a sudden that inner child came out and it'll just be gone. But what we do is we trap it in our body. And then we have to deal with fear in another way, that it's in here and it causes us health issues, all these other things, because it's a trapped item of fear inside of us. So I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but that's how I deal with it. That's how I'd coach it. If you did have fear, I would say, where is it showing up in your body? Let's address that. Let's really see what's happening there. And let's see if we can release that fear and make it excitement. Let's turn it into this, because I know you're never more alive than the day you're about to die. Therefore, fear and excitement and all that's in the same thing. Your body doesn't know any different. So let's reposition it.
So if I'm understanding correctly from that, it sounds like a lot of what you're doing when you're helping people deal with fear is effectively teaching them how to relax and let the process happen despite the fear, and then be able to just move through it in that respect.
So
Is that
the answer
correct?
you, John, is yes and no. So that's this much. So the next thing I would lead to is say, do you have something you're scared of, John?
For example, I would say like water, like deep bodies of water that I can't see in.
Okay, great. So then I would say, John, what about those deep bodies of water does your psyche see in there that's causing this? Because if we look at these situations, I can analytically probably prove to you that is not true. It won't do me any good. What I need to do is understand your psyche of what's allowing that to start to happen, so that we can either reposition it or get rid of that. Because once I start to talk about it and we start to go backwards through that, you'll have all these things. And it might be, I was in a bathtub as a child and somebody dunked me underneath there and I felt like I was going to drown. That brought you to where you're at today, but you don't even realize it. Does that make sense? And so if I
Yeah,
get
and
that
that's
bathtub incidents with you, and I can release that and say, but what happened? Well, I lived. Oh, you did. Okay, so let's talk about that. How did you live? What happened? But see, what you did is you anchored that to big bodies of water, deep, this, that, the others, this is the outcome's going to happen. When truth, that isn't truth. You could never say to me, is that truth? John would say, no, it's not truth. Okay, then can you really say that's truth? No. Therefore, it's something in your psyche that's causing that to be true. So I
That's
would look
interesting.
that way, honestly, if you want to know the
Yeah.
truth. But I'd also say in that fear, these are still also, you know what I'm saying? Then I could go back through the analogy and you'd be able to go, dang, I'm limiting my life because of this fear, which isn't a truth. And if it's not true, how can it be true to me? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And
So
it's funny because you use the bathtub analogy, and I do remember actually as a child, there was a point in time where I was taken to a swimming pool,
yep.
and I believe that I slipped or something like that, and I actually hit the back of my head on the
Ah,
concrete before
there you
falling
go.
into the water.
There you go.
So,
I
yeah,
honestly believe that once we understand that, you could go get that released, and all of a sudden the fear that you have right there, if you want to call it a fear, would actually be gone.
I thank you, Bart, for a counseling session. I just want to put it on the record. But it is funny how, like you said, 100%, I believe this in my background, psychology. The body does keep the score. Where that comes from, these feelings, that fear, where it shows
Go
up,
read it. The
it's
body
so
keeps score.
yeah,
It's
it's a
true.
great book, but I definitely, and I see that with fear. I don't want to get on the whole fear subject, but it seems to be for me when I talk to people who even have some really good or some great level of success that they're still held back by fears. And I think I just keep seeing that consistently, and they're holding themselves on this glass ceiling because of it. And like you said, I mean, I do see the excitement. I'm not afraid to try something, but I don't think most people are wired that way. Our body, our amygdala, our croc brain says, hey, how do I be safe and not get hurt? You know, and that's what we're always gearing the first response to.
Most fears, Chris, go back to something that's happened. So let's say, for example, not that I like to keep bringing it up, but it's already been brought up, is slavery. Let's say you were a slave and then you were free and then you had to take a risk, but that was locked in your body of that. Your chances of taking a risk are so little. It's been beat out of you. It's literally been programmed where you've cut it out. Therefore, you've got to understand that, go back that and say, man, totally understand where this is coming from. But if we address that core thing, there is the only way we can reinstall growth. And if it's been 100% cut out, you know, if you cut a weed out, if you get to a certain extent, it is literally gone. But if you don't, there's a hologram still there that is still very present, and you can re-energize that.
That's awesome. I think you do a good job of that with talking to people. But really, you know, one of my core beliefs, and I've heard it for years, and I really do believe it, that you are who you hang around with and your top 5 people. And if you're hanging around these people, they're going to reinstill these fears in you. That's who you're going to be. But like I said, get with people in different groups, and your group's been awesome to get and connect with, and to be able to see people who are just like me, trying something different in their lives, want to progress, want to get ahead, you know, want something different from their lives, I call it. And I really think you foster that into your community. How do you nurture that? So obviously talking to people, you can only have so many conversations on a super deep level. How do you foster that in your community? Because I see your community giving back in a ton of ways. So how are you nurturing or fostering that in folks?
That's good. Environment is everything. And so always remember, no matter where you're at today, your environment is affecting you in some way, shape, or form. And so anytime you want to make dramatic changes, and I don't, even if I were talking to, let's say, John, because he doesn't have a green screen behind him, if I restructured his environment behind him, I promise you it would elicit a change inside of him. If I changed even the way he dressed, even the way the pictures, the color of that wall, his entire environment, it would change the way he presents himself. So therefore, how I foster it is teaching people that environments are dramatic to what you're trying to do. So you made it, if I'm hanging around XYZ of people, I'll challenge it even further. If you're in an environment at a house, if you're in an environment in an office, is more powerful than who you hang out with, because you're there so much time. So your environment and how you, and that's why, Chris, in when I talk to people about putting sticky notes on their computer, when I talk about all the things, what I'm trying to do is change their environment and the way they see the longest period of times that they're with what they're trying to accomplish, because I believe that is the most powerful part of what you're trying to do in your equation. And sometimes you got to just up and move. And you're right, your environment of friends is part of that. Your culture of who you are is part of that. But don't take for granted the environment you live in, how you address yourself, the environment your car is. Like if I get in somebody's car, generally speaking, I can tell a lot about them, because if they've got trash in it, if they've got certain symbols in it, if they've if their car is clean on the outside, inside, like there's a lot of things, believe it or not, that are telltale signs of growth and or of clutter in your environment.
Very interesting and very true too. Like you can, one of the analogies that I like to think of is like very extreme. It's like if you see a gentleman getting out of a car that's older and more beat up and he's wearing ragged, dirty clothes, you make subconscious an analysis of who that person is and what they're about versus somebody who's well dressed getting out of a Lamborghini, and it's like there's a lot going on there.
And we understand that's profiling and not necessarily true, but you're exactly right.
Yeah, yeah. So to transition back to the coaching side of things, I've heard a bit of your story back in Idaho and everything, and we talked a lot about in Idaho the concept of the two different mountains, right? Like you have your first mountain and then you have your second mountain. And I'm really curious to know about your personal transition from your first mountain to your second mountain, how you kind of got to a point where you realized that it was time to do that, and then how you went about making that happen and getting into the coaching space, if you will, and ultimately getting like your first coaching client.
Thank you. So, man, there's a lot of ways I could take this. So I'll just kind of take it this way because it popped in my head first. But I coached prior to when I'm coaching now, and I hated it. Absolutely hated it. And the reason I hated it was because I was, I don't know how to say it the right way, but like I was, what I would tell people and ask people to do, they wouldn't take it as serious as I thought they should have. And so it would frustrate me, and it'd be like, I got to change you, and I didn't realize younger in my career that necessarily wasn't what they needed, if that makes sense. And so when I got into coaching the second time, I had a amazing human that was at my house, and she was in a place where I wasn't there to try to coach her. And long story short, she had some things. I went through it with her and really got into some different mindset things with her, and different reasons why things weren't working maybe the way I thought they should. And a lot of it had nothing to do with funnels and all these things. But long story short, she asked me to be her coach, and I said no. And then she asked me to be her coach again, and I said no. I fired her 5 times. And then she went to my amazing human wife and said, "What's your bank account number?" And she wired me an amount of money that I was like, oh. She goes, "Go ahead and send it back if you don't want to be my coach." And I was like, "Okay, I'll be your coach." That's how I got back into coaching. All right. So that being said, I really worked with her. I think it was 3 years we worked together. And I can honestly tell you, I probably only looked at 2 of her funnels. Now, most people listening to this are going to be like, oh my gosh, whatever. But honestly, I can tell you 99.9% of people come and invest in me for restructure a funnel, for some insight, which they get. Like there's little tweaks we need to make. I'm not going to try to say that there's not. But I guarantee you most of the time we're working together is literally helping them architect their life by design instead of just living and doing life. Once we have the design and we start to install the beliefs and understand the fears, understand human dynamics, and understand all of that, it's just that little tweak that abundance starts to really see it. Now, I'm not going to tell you that they don't have, some of them don't have a dip or a low or something that they're going through, because in all things, the universe, God, whatever, wants to just see how committed you really are to the process. But that also being, it's just important. So, so that next mountain, that's when it started for me to say, hey, don't be so caught up in, okay, I've got to show you how to change this color, do this in the funnel, and you've got to have the American flag here. And if you don't do this, and that's all I geek out. I really started to look at and say, in this next evolution of my life, I want to architect humans by design, which means I want them to know no matter what they do, if it fails or if it succeeds, they understand their purpose. They understand where they're going, and that's what's going to take all this to where they want it to be. And so that's been the funnest part of that next evolution. But it's a very tough thing for people to sell themselves on, if I'm transparent with you. Like if you both looked at me today at the end of the podcast and said, this is it, I promise you the first thing in our first call you're going to want to do is bring up your funnels. You're gonna want to go there first, and you're gonna be very adamant that we really got to address these things. And and it, like I said, I'm not gonna say there's not truth in some of that, but reality is it's deeper than you think.
For talking about marketing podcasts, I think we got into a lot of psychology stuff today, but I like it. I do. I think I like it. And I think that's one of the things you talked about, a lot of fear and drawing that out. I like the direction that things have gone today. But I do think the character, I want to back up a little bit. I mean, I've met some of your family, your wife especially. I know you guys are a team. You really talk about that. Something you said is, obviously people come to you, they want some coaching for business. But I think this is what I've seen personally, and you've helped me a ton, is relationships. And I think you really hit the nail on the head. You didn't really correct John, but tell him, your thought was, health and looking at things and wealth. And wealth's really a byproduct, I always believe, or a measuring stick of how you're doing. But, the health and the relationships are really where it is. And I think at the end of the day, you can have tons of money, but if your family and kids don't talk to you, what does it matter? What does it matter? You're really not that healthy in relationships. So I do think looking at relationships, it's easy as you're trudging ahead. I know it was in my early years. I know for you, probably the same thing. You're really trudging ahead with business and cranking away. And it's easy to forget about those loved ones because they're always there. So how do you help people with that? Obviously, the relationships, you come in, I think you're giving a lot of value to people with your coaching. And how do you think you're really giving back or helping people see that and how important that is?
That's a great, good question. And I'll go back to that. If I look at people, and yes, there's these measuring sticks, but the last measuring stick I look at is how much wealth they have. Because that's, to me, is not what we're here for. Just so we're very clear, is a human and human in design. It can be a byproduct, but it's not the core of what we're here for. So that being said, I like to just back down, and once again, you architect somebody by design, you get into their psyche and their beliefs. So I try to be very, not try to, I really believe that beliefs are installed in us from a very young age, and we've created who we are today because of those beliefs. And until you go back and challenge those beliefs, a lot of people lose who they really are. So I could spend a lot of time on this, and once again, psychology, but I believe that once I understand you and your core beliefs, there's people out there that like, I don't ever want to have a relationship, but I'm in one. I was like, oh, okay. So somewhere along the way, you got installed a belief that you needed to be in relationships or this intimate relationship. Yes. Okay, good. Okay. So, but you at your core don't believe in it. Correct. Okay. So let's go back. Let's revisit that. Let's talk about that, because you're not wrong. You're not wrong, but let's address it. Then you can start to say, what is this? What is this? What is this? What is this? Then you can do that. So how I do it is I believe, once again, this is a belief, doesn't mean you have the same, that network and family and relationship are the crucial part of growth as a human. So I believe that we need to learn how to communicate, how to be around somebody, how to how to understand dynamics between humans and that they're different, right? And so I just go back to that part of it. And then I really just go back and say, what's the outcome you want in life? What fulfills you in life? And then from there. So I don't know if I'm really answering you the right way, but I do, Chris, because you brought it up, I'll give you a couple of marketing things. If you want some real hardcore, drop the mic marketing things that I believe have built my career, it really comes down to this. I really believe in everything I do. Every info product needs an e-commerce product. Every e-commerce product needs an info product. So if I take you, Chris, and say real estate coaching has to have real estate. Real estate owners all need info of some sort. A property manager needs to have properties to manage. They also need to sell a system of property management if they're good at it. I believe that's where my career has really shined and how I've done every funnel. There's never a funnel or anything I've ever built in my career that doesn't have both elements. And I can get into that in why. So that's a gold nugget, if you want it, for all of your listeners. If you don't have both, you need to figure out how to have both, because it gives you the amount of money to invest in your ads and things you're doing that excel it. So for example, if you look at I Do Epic, that's why I created the book and the journal. That's the e-commerce part of the info part. And you'll start to see more things that line out that way. If you go to my $10 million funnel, yes, it was a camper leveler, but what gave us the ad spend was the ability to buy that with the upsell of being able to learn how to back and pull an RV info. Does that make sense? So if you look at all the things I've ever done in my career, and what I coach on the most, if I were even coaching you guys, is, okay, you've got this, but what about this? And where's this? And where's this element? If you add those together, that's what gives you the magic to this. Another thing, 99% of people that are out there in the internet marketing space, and that's a high number, think of themselves as they only can sell their products for some reason. And it mind blows me. It's like, okay, but your product, your competitor, this product that your competitor has actually can work and help. Why can't you sell it? Well, it's not mine. It's like, a buyer is a buyer is a buyer. If you have the relationship with a human being, and I come to you and say, hey, look, I drink this coffee and I think it's amazing, and here's all the research I've done, but I'm in the makeup space, the people look at that as very irrelevant. Well, it's not irrelevant. This person still drinks coffee and they still do their makeup. Therefore, it's okay to promote a coffee product in the right atmosphere if it's your right audience to them. Does that make sense? So they miss so many opportunities along the way because they're so tunnel focused on just them and their list and their things and what they are and what they, versus it's okay to bring outside things in and still be profitable from those things with the things that you've had. So e-com with info, always be looking for outside things you can promote to your audience because they are consumers no matter what it is, and don't be afraid of that. The other thing I would drop is that, most people come to me and they're like, they forget that they're always trying to be somebody else, or they're always trying to compare themselves to somebody else. And I always say, how many self-help books do you have on your shelf right now? And everybody's going to be like, at least 5. Okay. Did you learn something from all 5 of them? Yes. Okay. Well, then people are going to find unique things from every individual they get, and they're going to hear it from it. Like I can tell maybe you, Chris, something, and then all of a sudden Russell says the exact same thing, and you're going to be like, oh, I'm implementing that today. It's like, dude, I told you that a freaking year ago. But, and that can be very frustrating as a coach, let's be clear, but it's irrelevant because at the end of the day, we're all here and you're going to resonate and vibrate with somebody at a certain time that's going to make the light bulb go off. Our job is just to be us, be authentically you in your space, go out there, do your thing, and that will be the most attractive thing ever. And so those are just some things in my career that I've really tried to focus on. And if you watch my Instagram and you watch my stuff, it's like all over the board, and people are like, you need to do it this way. And I'm like, thanks. It's awesome. But guess what? It works for me and it pays my bills. And I like it. I'm just authentically me, and that's what I'm going to stick with. And, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay that you shouldn't like funnel hack, because you should. Like, it's not that I don't research. It's not that I don't do stuff, but authentically, I want to be me. And that's if I want to be this today, and I want to be the $1 billion cowboy tomorrow, or if I want to be the cycling strong goat man in cycling, if I want to be the bodybuilder, I can do all those things. And I don't care that people are like, dude, you got to stick with one thing. It's like, okay, I understand focus, but you know what I'm saying? I'm still going to be authentically me until it doesn't work.
That's awesome. I like that. Dropped a lot of value in the past few minutes. That was fantastic. That leads me toward one of the final questions that we like to ask all of our guests is, one more piece of insanely valuable advice that you could drop for us. We live in a day and age where we have technology that allows us to capture a moment in time and share it forever when we're dead and gone and all that. So like if there's one thing that you can think of in terms of all of your life experiences, personal, professional, all of it, that you would share with the world in the recorded fashion that we have the opportunity to do now, what would that advice be?
I hit on it earlier, is who you've architected today is not who you're going to be in 5 years from now. And if you're not willing to advance and grow, you're going to be in big trouble. So, and I say this in all relationships, who John is today in 5 years from now will not be the same human. Therefore, that's okay. Allow people to grow. Be with them. You need to grow. Doesn't mean you have to grow apart. Doesn't mean we're going to see everything the same way, but grow and allow yourself to grow. And that's the only way you become a redwood tree and become big and solid, is because you're able to keep growing and growing and growing. And that gives you multiple years, and not be so rigid to say, that's okay that they changed. It's okay that they are where they're at. It's okay. And I love them for who they are. I see their growth. And so if I were to anything, it would be challenge your beliefs, be willing to grow. Don't be so stuck on the things that you were ingrained and that were beat into you, and that, all the things, because they're there. And, I know I've got a lot of pushback on this, but I just believe that my job as a marketer, and understanding my job as a marketer, is to help you see that my way is the right way, and that my cult or culture is the ultimate cult and culture for you to be in. That's my job. That's the government's job. That's the job of every human that we're out there. Therefore, if you don't believe that you're being manipulated into that in some way, shape, or form, right or wrong, you've got an issue. And that's even your parents. Your parents are there to try to install beliefs to make you what they quote unquote think is a great human being. Now, in challenging beliefs, you've got a lot of work to do. I'm just suggesting do some of that work. And whatever you do in life, if you're depressed, it's because you're stagnant. If you're, all these things, like just play the game as a game, get in the game, understand the game was programmed by somebody. And if you want to go tinker with the programming, you can have a lot of freaking fun. You don't just have to sit in somebody else's program model for you, because that's what was in your programming and set for you. That's it.
Awesome. Appreciate you jumping in with us this afternoon, Bart, and connecting. And as always, just a ton of we call it gold nuggets, as you like to say. And I really appreciate that. I know our listeners got a ton of value, and we'll put how you can connect with Bart in the chat. Just really appreciate your time today. I just think you being genuine, authentic leads me to be more genuine, authentic, and I think that really shines through in who you are and Sonny is, your family are. And I just really appreciate that in a day and age where things are so just, like you said, articulated in a way that everybody looks good and smells good. But let's talk about what's really going on in life. I really appreciate that about you being authentic. So,
yeah. And I'll add one other thing, because you asked it and it hit me. So I would give you one other gold nugget in today's market that I would do. Take your cell phone, take your Tesla, lock them all up, find you a gas-ridden or find you a way to walk, take your family, take your friends, go somewhere and create what I would call an AI password. Now, you might think I'm crazy right now, but really create an AI password. Now, that's important because of where AI is going today. I can clone and be anybody. And I never want you to get a phone call from a significant other saying, we've got them here, they're held hostage, or we've done this or that, and you have no way of knowing if that is true or false. And how you can do that is by easily saying, what's the AI password? And if they know it, take it serious. If they don't, you know you're being duped. So I would encourage anybody listening to this today, which is at this point, in August, just really do that for yourself. I really believe that's more important than we're giving it credit for. And that's the secret password. And the reason I say to get rid of all technology is I never want to be heard. I'm not saying that they're listening in on us. But that being said, take it a little more serious than you do.
Yeah, I'd like to second that with, if you've seen any of the AI stuff that's going out there right now, you can find any recording that anybody has on social media, drop it into an AI bot and recreate their voice and make them say whatever you want by typing it in the chat. So I totally see where you're coming from. It's a very real thing and it's new. And that's the reason why a lot of people might find it skeptical, but just want to arm people with more information. So again, Bart, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciate it. Is there a place that if people want to get involved in your coaching or anything that you have going on that they should jump into or reach out to you at?
Thank you so much for that. The answer is yes. Come and join us in iDoEpic. Go to iDoEpic.com. That's the starter, and you can find everything out from there. And then I would suggest you go to WePlayFullOut.com, which is my wife and I's podcast and our newsletter. They are very different, but they are one of the same. But if you want to play full out and you want to be part of that ecosystem, go to WePlayFullOut.com. If you want to be in the networking and accountability and just really take yourself to the next level and really get to know, like, and trust me at a lower barrier of entry, go to iDoEpic.com. Thanks, you guys.
Awesome. Appreciate your time today, Bart. Take care.
Okay. See you guys.